Welcome back. You are watching a Metropole Television. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kienge. We are celebrating our women the entire month of March. And today, we look at how we can empower women-owned businesses to build back better. Now, gender equality is crucial to building thriving, inclusive African economies. And while both men and women are restricted by gender norms, young women disproportionately bear the burden of inequality. Now, COVID-19 is setting back recent gains made towards women empowerment across the continent and a post-pandemic recovery that not only ensures women are not left behind, but accelerates gender equity, which will spur Africa's economic growth and development. Now, joining us this morning to speak on this is Juliet Ongwae, who is a digital financial services specialist at Microsafe Consulting. Juliet, good morning.
Good morning, Simba. How are you?
Fantastic. We are happy to have you around. Let me get into that particular conversation. Juliet, the International Women's Day theme is breaking the bias. From what you've said this morning, what bias is there when it comes to women-owned MSMEs, or we've already moved beyond that?
No, we've definitely not moved beyond that. And with COVID, we have even seen, us taking a few steps back.
Yes.
So when you think about bias, you think about it in three ways. One is around product design. So the products designed are not gender sensitive. When you look at, say, onboarding processes, look at collateral requirements, they work against women, especially in this emerging market. We see women still lagging behind in terms of identity. So having proper identity that's required, say the national ID, yet that's a critical requirement when onboarding. We look at issues around women still not owning property, not owning land, yet that is a collateral requirement for financial services, especially for credit. So already it's working against the women, especially if they want to move towards growth or towards scale, where they want better financial services, where they want bigger ticket loan sizes and things like that. So we still see bias in terms of DFS or financial services for women. And this has become even worse post-COVID.
Pretty much. I'm coming to that particular area on exactly what we're talking about, what differences in terms of the challenges within COVID-19 that women in businesses have faced, especially when we compare them directly with the men-run enterprises. But let me take you back a bit to what you've just mentioned. What would you say is putting us still in this space in this particular decade, Juliet? Is it because we are still talking about women businesses as opposed to businesses in general? And do you think us still sticking to women businesses makes us look at women businesses differently? Is that what the challenge is?
Yes and no. We still need to look at women in businesses and how we can be gender sensitive.
Yes.
As we handle women in business. We're
yes.
not where
Juliet,
we can say just
Juliet,
businesses.
Juliet, I'm sorry to cut you short.
Yes.
I gotta tell you this. There is a school of thought that says that if then you single out women, then indeed you're making it difficult for them. But then if you work for the betterment of the entire sector, if you indeed want it to improve, then you gotta look at it as wholesome as opposed to saying, well, women in business as opposed to business or entrepreneurs.
Yes, and that's why I say yes and no. So why I say that is we still have deep structures in place. We still have to look at systemic change before we can say business in general and take out the women in business.
Yes.
So women are up against social norms that have worked against them for years. So we cannot just wake up and say, okay, it's time to drop women and look at just businesses in general. We still have to unpack those deep structures. We still have to look at how to mainstream gender, how to look at policies that work against women, before we can take out that women in businesses. So we first have to have that bigger conversation about how did we get here? What are these norms and values in place that are working against women before we can now start saying, you know what, take out women in business, it's, you know, all for one, and the environment is ready for everybody.
Yes.
Without that, we will always get into situations where we are talking about why just women, why not men, and you know, conversations around that. So we first have to unpack that before we can move forward.
Somebody listening to you would look at especially the Kenyan economy and say, we have legislation that is pro women in a business. And since we're talking about this decade, why haven't we caught up? Even when we look around and then saying legislation and laws that support women in business are available, and there are entities within the economy that are also supporting women in business. What makes women in business a special conversation, Juliet?
So we do have, let me call them programs in place.
Yes.
That are supporting women, especially with credit,
yes.
You know, specifically for women.
And legislation, if you might
and
say.
Legislation,
yes,
is supporting women.
Yes.
But we are supporting women that we have not prepared. Okay, mm-hmm. So we woke up, we changed legislation, we are starting to develop products, but we're working with women that are not ready.
Yes.
We need to still work in terms of coaching the women, business coaching, building trust and confidence. Okay, so these are women that have not been in business. These are women that have not even owned property, have not made decisions in the household, especially financial decisions. So they do not just wake up and run businesses. How do we support them along all these other interventions in place so that they are also business ready? And I think that's one of the areas that we drop. So we quickly changed policies, legislations, quickly put together products that still do not work for them, but we also do not prepare them to be ready to not only run businesses, but to actually grow, to scale, to innovate, and make sure you know, they get to the next level.
Yes, pretty much. Now, so we got into the COVID-19 pandemic, therefore. Juliet, are you able then to show us how COVID-19 pandemic affected women differently from how it affected men-run enterprises? And how were you able to come up with these differences and then say, well, you see, the differences in how women-run enterprises have been affected separately from men-run enterprises?
Yes. So I'll start with figures. We did conduct several studies, and in the studies we found that more women reported loss of income than men. So about just slightly more than 50% as
yes.
opposed to 30% men. Now you find women are in businesses that are in service sector, you know, so they while men might be in manufacturing, which still sort of transitioned through COVID. Service industry was affected very much during COVID and the shutdowns. So women found themselves either with reduced income or loss of income without any safety nets. Additionally, women increased or assumed higher roles in terms of childcare, in terms of homeschooling, as opposed to men. So when we look at the data, women hours in terms of working at home or working with children at home was at about 11 hours a day,
yes.
as opposed to men, which is 3 hours a day. So they had to move back home, take care of children, probably shut down businesses, or open businesses for a very short period. So when you look at that, already there's a disadvantage towards women, even during the pandemic.
Pretty much. And would you say then that these challenges are winning off in a 2022, or we're still right within them, Juliet?
They are winning off. We have seen reports of recovery. The numbers are still low.
Yes.
The women, are about 20% are reporting full recovery. But we are seeing, or maybe this is the time to seize the opportunity, even as they recover, so that they recover better.
Yes.
So not to where they were, but better. So we have seen with the pandemic, there's a push towards digital, mobile financial services. So how do we leverage on that? Women that had not used digital finance were pushed towards that. So even as they recover, how do we then build on that and make sure that now they can fully embrace DFS?
Pretty much. So that's the next part of the conversation now. And just before we get there, I'll be asking you, I mean, what are we fighting culture when we're talking about women in business and the challenges that women face in business? And I'm asking from this perspective, are we fighting the culture of, well, women don't have to be in business? Is that what we're fighting in this decade, Juliet?
Yes. Surprisingly, that's what we are fighting.
Yes.
So I listened to you earlier. We are having issues with Keroche.
Yes.
And there is an element of gender. So there's a boys' network that possibly we are missing out of.
Yes.
As women, that we probably need to build as women, or see how we can join this boys' network. Because it is necessary in business, and especially as you grow your business. So there is an element of culture we are fighting, and that's even at a higher level. At a lower level, we, as I mentioned earlier, we are fighting cultural norms, around, say, inheritance.
Yes.
So women are still not inheriting land or property. So that already disadvantages them. So there's many issues around culture that work against us.
Pretty much. Now, let's therefore talk about what we need to do differently and at 2022 onwards, if we're going to talk about helping women run enterprises bounce back better from the hold of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, Juliet, from what you said this morning, where does it need to start from?
Let's start with understanding. So
Yes.
the as is, and that only requires data. So right now, when you even try to look at data, it is aggregated data. How do we collect and start analyzing gender disaggregated data so that we can actually have the real picture of what's happening? What's the difference between men and women in business?
Yes.
How do the numbers look like? So that we have decisions based on data or informed by data. So right now, they're not informed by data, so probably they will not work. So let's first start there. How do we get the right data? Who has this data, and how do we collect the data? Second is possibly how do we support business women businesses, probably through creating a business value for the financial service providers.
Yes.
So possibly a guarantee scheme or a risk sharing scheme, so that they can be confident in serving women, especially in the beginning. So how do we also support them to start working with women? Because there's this perception that working with women is risky. And so possibly support them so as they learn about women, as they collect data about women,
Yes.
and then be able now to fully work with women. Third would be around possibly product redesign. So how do we make them a little bit more gender sensitive? So again, it's not product for women, but a product that is sensitive to women.
Yes.
Looking at flexible KYC. So if women do not have IDs right now, what can we use, at the meantime, to be able to onboard them? Looking at how we can bring on board, say, female agent, so that women are comfortable engaging with agents as they join DFS. Because right now we also get feedback that they are concerned in terms of working or approaching male agents. So we could bring on board female agents. So those are some of the little nuances we can add to our products to start bringing the women into DFS.
Yes.
And scale.
Pretty much. Let's talk about market. And I was looking at some report, I just can't put my finger on it, that was saying that indeed when you look at women-run enterprises, that women would like to do smaller businesses. Indeed, they have the capacity to grow their enterprises, but in more ways than one, you'll find them saying, well, I would just like to run my business as small as it is. Is that also a challenge? And is that a culture that we have to change? And how are we going to beat that, Julia, from where you're sitting this morning as well? Because indeed, when we talk about women in a business, it can't be the kiosks, has to be businesses that are run across the board.
Okay, I would want to see that report because I challenge that report.
Yes.
Women do want to run big businesses. And I think women run businesses better than men. But at the point where they're at, as I mentioned, we still need to build their confidence.
Yes.
So possibly that is what gives the impression that women want to run only small businesses. I think if when you look at a woman's livelihood, her household, they are all tied into one.
Yes.
So if we are able to take care of 360, the woman would be able to grow her business from small to medium to large. But at the point, if it's the same woman that has to be at home in terms of childcare, it's the same woman that cannot get bigger ticket size loan because she doesn't have collateral, because that's the only thing we are asking for, and we've not brought in place other different ways to assess credit, then we will, essentially what we are doing is making them remain small.
Yes.
So I don't think it is what they want, it is how the market is structured. And if we open up the market, I can guarantee that we'll be seeing more women in medium and large enterprises.
Pretty much. On that particular area for market access, do you think that we as an economy have really opened up the markets for women-run enterprises in the country? Because again, that has been a bigger conversation, that indeed we have businesses full potential without proper market access. Would you say we've made gains? And as the COVID-19 pandemic really taught us different ways of then opening local enterprises to outside markets, you would say?
Yes, we've made gains, and I think I will also give it to women. We've also started to be very innovative.
Yes.
With COVID, we saw a push towards e-commerce. So we are not even waiting. We have moved to e-commerce platforms. So you see a lot of women businesses in online marketplaces, which then means they've been very innovative in how they handle one of the barriers where they have to stay home and take care of children.
Yes.
So they can run their businesses from home. They're tapping into markets beyond Kenya because now they've placed their businesses online. So we have opened up marketplaces, especially as we leverage more on digital, but women themselves are also looking at, okay, this is my situation, how can I be innovative and still make sure that my business stays running and grows?
Pretty much. Now, Julian, I want you to speak specifically at MSA. What women-centered projects are you running so far? And what do you aim to achieve with some of the initiatives that you're currently running that are women-centered, would you say?
Yes. So we have numerous projects we're working on and with women.
Yes.
And I think what we are looking at now is increasing the usage of DFS. So we've seen high numbers in terms of access. Especially in Kenya, we cannot say we have a problem with access, but we are still seeing low numbers in terms of use of DFS. So how do we keep the women using digital end to end? So that are some of the projects we're working on, where we are looking at how to sensitize these digital products, how to bundle these digital products. So we're not just looking at credit and savings. How do we bring on board health, insurance, investment, all on digital platform for women? So bundling products. And finally, also, how do we support them? So as I said, women still need non-financial services.
Yes.
How do we digitize this? So how do we ensure that they have the right information? They continue to have business coaching digitally. So those are some of the projects we're working on.
Pretty much. Finally now for Juliet this morning, give me your prediction. I don't want to say optimism, because you're right within really trying to change that aspect for women and women in business. Could you give me your prediction as to when we'll come back and say, I think we are there now when it comes to women achieving parity with men when it comes to business in the region and the country as well?
We've begun the conversation.
Yes.
We are standing up for ourselves. You can see the unfortunate incident that happened recently.
Yes.
The women are standing up and pushing back. And beyond that, we are also very, very creative and innovative. So not wallowing, but saying, okay, this is the situation. How can we innovate? How can we still grow our businesses? And how can we get to the level where men are at? So there's a lot of push. So I'm very positive in terms of where we'll be in a few years. And we are also seeing a push towards putting women in the middle of governance and policy. So I think that's the right track. With that, in a few years, we will not be talking about women in business, but business in general.
Pretty much. Juliet Ongwae, PhD, DFS specialist, MSc, thank you very much for taking your time this morning to speak to us here at Metropole Television. And I'll make sure I get you hands on that report that indicates that women would rather run smaller businesses as opposed to bigger businesses like men would want to as well.
Thank you very much for having me, and I would love to see that report.
Pretty much. We take a short break here on business, and once we come back, top on that, food inflation versus general inflation. Is that something that the government can stop, or it's a conversation out of hand? Once we come back here on a Metropole Television.